Let's move to the third chapter and focus on our emotions.
Yes, because regulating your emotions is so important, as like sport is emotion. And I think without emotion, sports would even be boring. But the fact is that emotions do affect our performance. So anger because of an offense, or anxiety when faced with uncertainty, or shame if you have missed a call, for example, and your ideal picture is never making mistakes, but you can also experience happiness or pride and so on. So emotional scenarios, for example, you are officiating a game and it's not the greatest level of lacrosse, so that does something with your own emotions. But of course, there are also emotions of other people, the players, the coaches, the fans. For example, one player or team continues to make the same fouls while the other team is playing by the rules. So this can, of course, increase emotions in different people, or you start to feel angry with them and you catch yourself looking for a moment to sanction that player or them again. You start to compensate. What is really important is that you need to regulate your own emotions before you manage the emotions of other people. And that is what we want to zoom in on. I don't know, Lauren and Séraphine, can you give an example where you experienced quite an intense emotion during a game?
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of them. I mean, we need to remember that, you know, we put on the striped shirt and we have a job to do, right? When we go out there, we are not meant to be anybody's friend. We're the necessary evil. And I always say to myself, I'm needed in this game. I'm here for these players so that they can do this. They can have this experience. Not here for the fans or the coaches. I'm here for them. So that just sort of brings it down to one level. But the thing of it is we are people too. And everybody there sees the striped shirt. They don't see the human behind the shirt. And, you know, it can affect you if you have one coach who's constantly criticizing you. You know you've made the right call. You know you're doing the right thing. But that coach just either doesn't know the rule, or, you know, he's seeing his player doing something differently. And I mean, there's a lot of ways to handle that. But I think the biggest thing is, before it becomes an emotional distraction for you, is to, when you can, stop the game, stop the play, and do what it is you need to do. Whether it's a card, whether it's going over and having a chat with the coach, whether it's calling in the captains, you know, whatever the situation dictates, do it before it becomes a distraction to you and you make it a part of your game. That's what you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're completely right, Lauren. But I do think, you know, you're talking, I think, scenarios where people are already confident enough to take those actions. I think we also have a part of our audience who probably isn't at the level where they feel confident enough to go like, Coach, we need to talk about this. Because it's the thing, I mean, it took me a couple of years to build up the confidence to actually do something like that. What this brings up for me is one of the mentors I had when I first started out was just a very calm official, and, you know, took everything with a smile. And anytime they would step in, they would alleviate the situation, no matter how big, you know, how big the foul was or how small the foul was, or you know, obviously after a while, if it's going to be like here it says continued fouls, like Lauren said, you're going to start doing something about it. But everything that person did was, you know, very calm, as opposed to, you know, other umpires I knew, and even myself when I started out, when I saw something that really frustrated me, because obviously I'm also a player, and sometimes you'll be like, if that had happened to me, so that can bring up that emotion, like you say, Eva. So sometimes you'd be so kind of not disgusted, but still kind of appalled by something that happened on the field, that I would catch myself reacting in a way that was a little bit more forceful than I intended. So my signal would be a little bit too abrupt, or, you know, I would see something out loud and it would be, you know, a little bit too harsh. And that's obviously also, it's not good for your mental state, but it's also not adding to the situation, because, you know, if you react in a harsh and in an abrupt way, that's going to more fuel the flame than take away from it. So it's something that I really learned from that person, is whatever you do as an official, you want to try to de-escalate the situation by not adding your own emotion into what's already an emotional circumstance or situation anyway. Because if you are feeling emotional about something that happened, well, imagine how the people involved in the situation actually feel. So yeah, that's it's definitely something that I recognize.
Mm-hmm. If you have a more experienced person like that working with you, then absolutely, that's where we go back to what we were first talking about the leadership. That's where that leader does step in support of the team, and help de-escalate the situation. If you have 2 or 3 officials of lesser experience or of equal experience, or you don't have that more savvy, experienced official with you, then the same thing can be accomplished with the whole team. The team coming together, quick timeout, or, you know, if there's a stoppage of play anyway, after a goal or whatever, coming together quickly and discussing that and sharing it. And, okay, this is how we're going to move forward as a team. And if the decision is we need to have a quick chat with the coach, you go over as a team, you've got each other, right? So you're not hung out by yourself.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing these personal feelings. And I also think it's important to talk about these feelings and emotions, just already to recognize and be aware that emotions do play an important role in our performance. And as you said, Lauren, it's very important to deal with them. And I also think that experience will help. If not, if you're working with less experienced colleagues, then indeed collaboration is a very wise thing to do. And I also believe that if you train to regulate your emotions, so this is like also a mental technique, then you can also proceed in dealing with your emotions on the pitch. But of course, we stay human. We will never be robots. So of course, emotions keep on playing a part in the game. Our own emotions as an official, as a player, as a coach, also the fans, it stays there, of course. But let's have a look at what is happening in our brain, because already understanding how our brain works can also make a difference to your performance and often to our lives too. So if we have a look at our brain, there are 3 main parts with their own specific functioning. So you have the reptilian brain, which represents our instincts, the limbic brain, which represents our emotions, and then the neocortex. This is representing our rational brain. Without this neocortex, you wouldn't be able to officiate or to take objective decisions, to plan, to organize, or to control impulses. So this is, of course, also a very important part of our human brain. In a stress-free environment, your neocortex will rule, and you will be able to take objective decisions. But under pressure, the emotional part of your brain tends to take over and wants to override the rational brain. So like in a game, your neocortex and your emotions, they are competing to get the upper hand. And sometimes, of course, it's also good that your emotions come out as a winner of that duel, but much more often you have to keep a cool head. Of course, how do you do that? Let's look at some techniques to regulate your emotions. First thing is recognize that there is an emotion within you. And first thing is important that you name your emotions. So if you just put a label on your feelings, the intensity of your emotion will be reduced. So it has a calming effect on both positive and negative emotions. But when people label a strong emotion, apparently there is less activity in the emotional brain and greater activity in our rational brain. And that is what we need to make objective decisions. So naming emotions can be a game-changing skill. Simply saying, I feel bad or I feel frustrated, almost immediately brings emotions back down to the baseline. So it helps bringing your reaction under control and to move on more quickly. When, for example, you are feeling strong emotions after making a mistake, naming that emotion is an essential skill. Next step is to tell yourself that a part of you is feeling frustrated, but you are not your emotion. You are much more than that. If I can use a metaphor, it's like you are a blue sky and there are some clouds. These are representing your emotions, but you are much more than just these clouds. You are like a blue sky. You're much bigger than your emotions. So in that way, you also take a distance from your own emotions. What also helps when you are like having negative thoughts or feeling or start feeling to panic, you can also learn to refocus yourself quickly. When do we perform at our best? Kris already also told you, if our attention is fully in the here and now. So if our attention is with the previous mistake, is it with the evil eyes of the onlookers at the sideline? Is it with the fear of missing a call again? Then your attention is not fully in the moment. So it's very important to immerse yourself in the moment with all your senses. So if you find that your attention is slipping into your thoughts or feelings of panic, notice it and use this 3-2-1 technique to refocus yourself. What is this about? You say to yourself, or you name 3 things that you see, 3 things that you hear, and 3 things that you feel. Then you name 2 things that you see, 2 things that you hear and feel, and finally name 1 thing that you see, hear, and feel. Of course, this could maybe take too long during the game to complete the full scenario. You can also focus yourself on 3 things: 1 thing you see, 1 thing you hear, 1 thing you feel. For example, my shirt is striped, the grass is green, I hear a whistle, or I hear my fellow official saying something to me. So really focus and name what you see, what you hear, what you feel. And this helps to refocus yourself and to bring your task focus back in the here and now. Okay, so these are some techniques that you can use in the game. When you are dealing with strong emotions, is it either positive or negative? You can label them and you try to refocus by executing this 3-2-1 technique. But also after the game, your emotions can be strong and can influence an objective review and debriefing, just like the emotions of your colleagues. So that is why it is wiser to first also there process your own emotions and even to postpone the debrief of the game for a while, if possible, but that's not, of course, not always realistic, even 24 hours later. Because if you have slept on it, your emotions have been processed and your rational analysis will be sharper. So this is what we wanted to share with you in terms of regulating emotions. As said, emotions do play a role in sports and also increase the motivational factor, the fun factor, but they can also affect our performance. And that is why it's also important to learn some techniques to try to deal with them in the game and also post-game. Séraphine, Lauren, can you add some tips or advice that you use to deal with your own emotions?
Well, I would say that the refocus exercise, while it's different, there's probably not enough time during a game to do that, but it's something that if you're feeling frustrated and emotional, nervous, and just not your best, that's something that you could do at halftime to sort of reorganize your thoughts. So that's a good one for somebody who's just not feeling like they're having their best game. Mm-hmm. That's a very good one. Yeah. And there would be time at a halftime for that.
Yeah. Great points.
Yeah, no, I also find the refocusing exercise, I think, like you said, to put yourself again in the here and now, and you know, kind of disconnect yourself from that emotion that you were feeling. And also, I think the phrase "you are not your emotion," I find that very powerful, because it's true. You're a very multifaceted human being, and you're just emotional right now, and recognizing that and stepping out of it. I did have a question coupled to that, Eva. You know, the situation that I was talking about when I started out umpiring, and that, you know, you make a call, and because obviously afterwards you realize that you were a little bit too heated. But is there any way that, you know, people who after games maybe get that feedback, you know, you were coming on a little bit stronger, how can they make sure that during the game, even before it happens, maybe things like that can be counteracted? Is there a technique maybe for that? Or
But I suggest that also beforehand that you talk about this with your fellow colleagues. So if they notice that some of you become too emotional, that you tend to agree on a signal, and then you get aware of, okay, apparently my emotions are raising too high. So that they can help you also in becoming aware, and if you then label indeed your emotion, and you try really when you are very emotional, this 3-to-1 exercise, then you will also become more calm.
with something that I think that's a really good tip, especially if it's something, it's feedback you get, but you're not always aware with. I think in some cases that might also be the case. Something that I personally do when it's a big hit, when it's a big call, definitely you blow your whistle, but before I signal, I kind of just take like a small breather. I go like, okay, and then I go for it, so that I'm sure that, you know, my reaction is detached from however I'm feeling about it personally. So I'm trying to make sure that, you know, and I always go back and think about, especially when it's a tense situation, if there are any Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans, there's a very, very famous BD, which is what would Buffy do. In this case, the D is replaced with another letter from me, but I always think, what would this person do? So if you have like an official that you admire for their style and their ability to de-escalate things, you know, just thinking about like, okay, what would they do in this situation? For me, that also helps stepping out of the situation, because it's no longer about what would I do. It's about like, okay, what is the ideal scenario here that's going to follow from this? So I always try to kind of go in with that vibe.
Great example, yeah, because at that moment you take in another perspective and you take more distance from your own personal emotional mood. So that is a very good advice.
Excellent. So I'm conscious of our time, also for the audience. So let's move to a summary of the toolbox that we have built today in our presentation. So we talked about some tips and suggestions for preparing your game, and then a couple of techniques that you can use to manage your game, so in-game management. So when preparing your game, it's a good idea to be mindful of the curve that we talked about, the optimal level of arousal, and find your sweet spot, find your ideal level of emotional and physical arousal. And if you're not in the zone, you can have a couple of exercises to psych up, right? To music, video, physical activation to increase your energy level. If you're feeling already stressed or maybe even anxious, you can use relaxation, breathing exercises to decrease the tension. And we talked about imagery as a really, really powerful tool, also working with images from previous games to get ready, to give yourself a confidence boost and be 100% ready for the game. So make sure to build some of these mental techniques into your game preparation. The same, like you are taking care of your physical preparation, you're taking care of nutrition, the water intake, etc., sleep and recovery. Also on the mental side, make sure that you have a very effective game preparation. And then the in-game techniques that we talked about, techniques to stay confident, techniques to regulate, to manage your emotions. We just talked about labeling, right? Like you're watching yourself from an external point of view, and you label your feeling. You can also put a score on the feeling from 1 to 10, and then think of how to go from 8 to 5, for example. These are a couple of things to engage in the rational part of your brain and not let the emotional part of the brain hijack you, right? So we are labeling the emotion, and it's only part of me that is feeling frustrated or angry, and I have other emotions that help me to get back into the driving seat, if you like. And then refocusing our attention. We talked about the internal perspective, starting to worry, starting to doubt yourself, and try to go to an external focus. Focus on a player, focus on the ball, on assistant who can give you a signal that things are under control, things like that. Yeah. So play with your attention. Make sure that you are aware where the internal attention is going and how you can switch from external to internal and back. Yeah. So you need to be master of your attention, just like you are mastering your emotions. And then we talked about self-talk. Yeah. We talked about our inner critic and how this inner critic can sometimes take over and be very negative. So we have a couple of, you can build a habit with positive sentences, positive statements and phrases. I got this, I'm managing this, I just made a mistake, I'm human, I'm moving on, things like that. Yeah. So make use also of self-talk which is a very useful technique to remain in control, to take charge, to be the official that you can be. So our final take-home message would be to create your own routines, right? To have a look at this toolbox, to play around, to read a little bit more, and to make this mental game plan really a part of your preparation and of your delivery. We have added a couple of ideas and some more insights. We will make sure that you get access to the slide deck, and you can find some more techniques on our website. And we have also listed some great books on sports psychology, both from a referee point of view, but also for coaches and athletes. And a lot of these techniques that we talked about are explored and are described more in depth. So we would invite you to have a look at that and build your toolbox. Going to head over back to Séraphine for a closing remark.
Thank you so much. I personally found this very helpful. I think we saw a lot of great techniques, maybe things that people are already doing on a subconscious level, but I think it's always very valuable to pull it to the conscious level and to really, instead of just being something that you do, making it something that you use, and with the goals that you have in mind. I can definitely see, for me, that's the case. So I really hope, and I know that this is going to help a lot of umpires getting back on the field and going further in their mental journey and their journey on the field. Lauren's dog totally agrees with me. No, I really want to thank you, Kris and Eva, and Lauren. I really want to thank you for being here. I hope that you share my opinion on the value of what we saw here today.